こんにちは、皆さん、ジェームズです。今月の映画は黒澤明の生きるです。
Hi everyone, first things first, Happy New Year, and thank you for coming last time. As a huge fan of musicals, I particularly enjoyed all the recommendations I received, and I hope you guys went away with a few of your own, especially for some of you, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So, I wanted to do something a bit different this time. For the past 6 months, we've focused on a variety of themes for the club, but all of them have had one thing in common. They all espouse commonly held Western values in some form or another, and so much of it has been me teaching you or us exploring those. This month, I want to change things up just a bit and veer away from the cultures that are closer to mine and explore yours some more. So, having said all that, the theme this month is Japanese movies, and the movie I would like you to watch is Ikiru by Akira Kurosawa. Being Japanese, I think you guys can offer an insight that I wouldn't ordinarily get, and I certainly know some cinephiles back home who are rather jealous and that I get to hear some first-hand accounts of what these movies might mean to Japanese citizens. I was surprised and a little heartbroken to discover that when I moved here, many people, like people in my country, have heard of Akira Kurosawa, but not everyone has watched his movies, not even his most famous ones like Shichinin no Samurai. So I thought I'd use this as a perfect platform, a great opportunity for me and for you guys, for me to share my favorite Japanese movie, I suppose, my favorite Kurosawa movie, Ikiru. Disclaimer, this is a very sad movie. It might touch a few nerves. So, first and foremost, I want to tell you a brief history of Japanese cinema and why it's been so important to us in the West. I think we can break Japanese cinema into two distinct eras, which I will call the Kurosawa era from 1950s to 1980s and the anime era from the 1980s till now. So the most influential and famous Japanese movies of the Kurosawa era are Rashomon, Shichinin no Samurai, Yojimbo, and The Hidden Fortress, just to name a few. Kurosawa was one of those directors where practically every film he made was exceptional. But I've limited the list to those four because their influence is the easiest for us to chart. You've got Rashomon, which was the first film introduced the West to the Japanese style of movie making. It was universally acclaimed at the time in 1950, and it basically allowed for Japanese movies to continue to flourish. Next is Shichinin no Samurai, as we know it, Seven Samurai. That remains to this day the most famous Japanese movie. It is credited as the first action movie by some, and directly inspired the Western version, The Magnificent Seven. So, by the 1960s, Westerns were the most popular genre in Hollywood, and the biggest director at the time was a man named Sergio Leone. He was most famous for doing his Dollars trilogy. But Sergio Leone was not without his own controversy. He was one of the most popular American directors at the time, but for his first big movie, A Fistful of Dollars, he was actually sued by the Kurosawa estate, because it was a flagrant ripoff of his movie Yojimbo. And when you watch the two movies side by side, there's no question of Kurosawa's influence. And then couple that with The Magnificent Seven and Seven Samurai, it's clear that Kurosawa almost single-handedly informed American cinema over a course of about 10 years. And I just think that's really something to marvel at. And finally, if you watch Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, you might recognize that every plot point feels somewhat familiar. And if that's the case, it's because the film was remade and repackaged in 1977 by a man named George Lucas, and he named his version Star Wars. So what I'm getting at by telling you all this information is that even if you've never seen a Kurosawa movie yourself, you have most certainly seen a movie that was influenced directly by him. His influence was and is everywhere. And so you've no doubt been affected by him in some way. So I think it'd be interesting to trace it back to its roots and expose you guys to a Kurosawa movie. I'd love to hear your opinion on it. So now that I've told you about the history of Kurosawa himself, you might be wondering why I chose Ikiru for you to watch and not any of his others. The reason I chose this, aside from it being my favorite, is that this is one of the rare occasions where Kurosawa made a film in a modern setting. You know, he typically loved sort of Shakespearean drama or historical epics, and he was so good at those. But Ikiru really stands out as an anomaly because it's quite quaint in comparison. It's set in a modern setting in then modern times of 1952. It tells the story of an old salaryman who discovers early in the film that he's dying. And the film is about him coming to terms with that fact, but also on him reflecting on his life so far. He's given the question, what was it that he lived for? Because he spent his whole life working. It's clearly a commentary on the working life of Japanese people. This is another main reason why I think you guys will have a real insight into this. I don't doubt you have plenty of stories that might be conjured up as a result of watching this movie. I really wanted to know if the film's commentary on Japanese work life still stands today. What's different between 1952 and now, if anything at all? So, just to reiterate, my question is, number one, was Ikiru a realistic depiction of the working life of the average Japanese salaryman? Number two, based on your personal experience, how has Japanese working life changed since 1952? Do you feel like this exact film could be made today with almost no changes and still resonate with people? So after we get into this movie, I'd love to hear a bit more about other Japanese movies that you like. It doesn't have to be exclusive to the Kurosawa era. I'm more than happy to talk to you guys about recent Japanese anime, but I considered saving that for another class as well. I think that would be a really good idea because there's quite a lot to unpackage. But we can talk a little bit about it because it's still Japanese cinema, so we'll see. I think one of the key differences between the two eras, with the exception of Hotaru no Haka, is the anime era is much less tragic than the Kurosawa era. And perhaps this is a sign of the changing attitudes over time. Maybe it's a generational thing. It just seems to me that Japanese cinema is much more optimistic now. But this is the exact kind of thing I'd love to hear you guys talk about, because you'll know more than I do. So one more thing before I go. If you like Ikiru, I really want to recommend a similar story that is the same but much less sad. You don't have to watch this for the club. This is just me talking directly to you and saying sorry if Ikiru made you feel upset. So the movie is called Wild Strawberries. It's by Ingmar Bergman. It was released in 1957. It's the same premise, but told in a much happier, optimistic tone. I feel like recommending this movie will help cleanse the palate after I forced you to watch Ikiru. And so that's it for this month. It's a little bit denser, I think, than usual, but I think you guys will have quite a lot to talk about. So I'm very much looking forward to listening to your opinion on this. So there we have it, Akira Kurosawa's Ikiru. It's my favorite Kurosawa movie, one of my favorite Japanese movies, and I hope you guys like it too. So yeah, I've been James, and I'll see you at the Media Club. Bye-bye.